This lesson is best experienced with quality monitoring. To optimize your environment, headphones are recommended.
Let's go! Okay, so let's do it. Let's just dive right in. The one sound that our ears are most in tune to more than any other is the human voice. We know what the human voice sounds like. So let's just do it between these three microphones that we've got set up here. I'm going to speak into each one, and typically I apply a little bit of EQ just to make things sound nice and rich, but this time we're going to hear the raw output between these three microphones. And we'll start with the dynamic microphone, the Shure SM57 over here. Are you ready? This is the sound of my voice through the Shure SM57. You'll notice its character, and we'll move on to the next mic. This is the sound of my voice through the condenser microphone, the Audio-Technica 4050. You'll notice a slight change in character. And finally, this is the sound of my voice through the ribbon microphone, the Royer 121. Once again, you notice a slight change in character between the ribbon mic, the condenser mic, and the dynamic microphone. All speaking on axis, all speaking from just about the very same distance. Okay. Next, we have one of my very favorite sounds, and you'll notice that I've repositioned all three microphones. The sound of a bottle of champagne opening. Now, this is a full frequency sound. It's going to have lows, it's going to have highs, it has a great attack, it has an interesting sustain and decay. So let's check it out, and then I will individually isolate each microphone so that you can hear them in Pro Tools. Opa! Cheers, my friends. All right, so here we are. It's a whole different day, as you can tell. In fact, it's the middle of the night where I am right now. And I can't imagine why that last video would have ended just after the bottle of champagne opened. Doesn't matter. In any case, what we're going to do is we're going to examine those individual signals that we just heard. The three microphones all recording that singular event of the cork popping out of that champagne bottle and then a little bit of pour that followed. And the first mic that we are going to listen to was our dynamic microphone, the Shure SM57. So let's listen, and then we can talk a little bit about what we're going to hear. Opa! Okay, so in general, dynamic microphones are going to have these characteristics. First, they're going to have a quieter or a weaker signal output, which means if I hadn't adjusted the gain independently between the microphones, if I just put the same gain setting on all of them, the dynamic microphone would be a weaker signal than the condenser. However, to compensate for that so that we were able to clearly hear everything, I gave the dynamic microphone a little extra juice at the preamp. And that gives us the ability to have really a fair comparison between these. The next thing we can say about a dynamic microphone is that it will generally have a more limited frequency response, meaning it won't record as full a frequency range as a condenser microphone might. And it will typically have a more colorful frequency response. And all that means, really, is that it is going to emphasize certain parts of the frequency spectrum more than others. And that can be a good thing if you pair the right dynamic mic to the right source. Okay, the next microphone we're going to listen to is the condenser microphone. And for this case, we used an Audio-Technica 4033 as our condenser microphone. Let's listen, then we can talk a little bit about that. Opa! Well, I'll tell you what I perceived in that. And if you're listening through your quality cans here, maybe you heard something similar. What I felt was that during the initial pop, I didn't hear a huge change. Part of that might just be that it's such a brief transient, such a short moment in time. But during the pour, I heard a lot more of the detail of the bubbly and the fizz and those very airy, shimmery overtones that are way up there. And maybe you heard something similar. And if you were trying to capture a source that had those airy, shimmery overtones, what are some high-frequency sources you can think of? Well, if we're thinking musically, certainly things like cymbals on a drum kit have a lot of very high frequency. Wind instruments, flutes and reeds will generally have a really specific high-frequency character. Maybe you want it and maybe you don't. If you're trying to capture the really, we'll say, the woody part of a reed instrument or the really airy texture of a flute, or even the scrape of a bow pulling across the strings of a violin, then you might choose a microphone that is better capable of capturing those really subtle high-frequency details, and that might be where a condenser comes in. Condensers are also capable of having the most flat frequency response. And when we talk about a flat frequency response, really all we're saying is they can get close to representing at the output of the mic an accurate picture of what came into the microphone, or a more accurate picture. Now, no microphone will have a perfectly flat frequency response across the whole range of human hearing, but if you choose the right condenser, you can get closer to that goal than you could if you were choosing a ribbon or a dynamic microphone. And speaking of ribbons, let's listen to our final ribbon microphone here. This is the Royer 121. That we're going to hear next. Opa! And ribbon microphones first of all, will likely have the quietest output or the weakest output when all microphones have the same gain applied to them. But also, ribbon microphones generally will have the least articulated top end, the least of those really, really subtle, airy frequencies up here. They're probably not the mic to choose if what you're trying to get is an intimate, richly detailed top end to your signal, right? Probably not where you're going to go. Here are sort of general guidelines, though. It's never a bad idea if you're trying to capture the whole sound of a source and you have the capability of putting up different types of microphones on that source. By all means, it's not uncommon when I'm in the studio that I am going to put two different types of microphones on one source and listen to each. Sometimes I'll choose to use only one or the other. Sometimes I'll choose to blend those two signals together. I love to put a dynamic microphone and a ribbon microphone on electric guitar amplifiers. I love to put condenser microphones on things like acoustic guitars because you want that really clear and present top end to them. Acoustic guitars have such shimmery, rich, high frequency information, right? If I'm recording something that is very loud and I want to record it as tight and directly as I can, I'll choose a dynamic microphone because dynamic microphones have that ability to get close to a source and not overload and not damage the microphone. They can handle a lot of input level. And because their output tends to be weaker, we don't have to worry so much about are we going to overload or distort the electronics that follow. Of course, we still have to worry about it. But if we're making good, smart decisions and we're paying a little bit of attention to what we're doing, a dynamic microphone is probably your better choice for getting those very loud sources. Now, if you don't mind a little bit of room, if you're in a room that sounds good, then you want a little bit of room in the signal, you can still record a loud source with a condenser or a ribbon microphone. You're just going to place it further from the source itself. And of course, as you get further from the source, that means you're getting less direct sound and more of the reflected sound, right? Okay, well, hopefully that provides a little bit of insight for you. Of course, we're going to experiment a lot with this during Audio Engineering 1. We're going to use many microphones on many different kinds of sources, and you will have the ability to choose yourself, and then we will go back and we will listen, and we'll have all sorts of ways of evaluating just what it was that we heard. That's next semester. Until then, right now it's time to bounce. Once again, this is Scott Velasco fading out.